Most people who want to write a book say that they want to write a best selling book. Meanwhile, they don't know it's impossible to write a best selling book. Here's why. The term best selling means the book that had the best executed marketing plan for that book and sold a particular amount of books within a given time period. It has nothing to do with the quality of the words on the page. I mean, people don't even have to read the book in order for it to be considered a bestseller. The words on the page could be a hot smoking pile of trash, or it could be the next best thing since Shakespeare wrote Macbeth. So if being a bestseller has nothing to do with the written quality, what exactly do people mean when they say that they want to write a bestseller? I believe that they want to write a book that's considered high quality, a good read, riveting even. Because back in the day, when things like the New York Times bestseller began, books truly got that status because it was critically acclaimed. People gave those books lots of great word of mouth, and they genuinely enjoyed reading those books. Therefore, sales increased. Nowadays, it's just way too easy to gamify any of these lists, including the Amazon bestseller ranking. But the prestige still lingers on. People still assume that if your book is a bestseller, it must be well written and that it's a great read. So if you want to write a thought leadership book that keeps your readers turning the pages to the point where they can't help but recommend your book to their colleagues and friends, I'm going to show you in this video how to write an engaging, interesting, enjoyable to read thought leadership book, even if you're talking about the driest subject. I'm Denise Renee, your business book bestie. Here is my signature book, and these are some of my clients. I help professionals write books that make their business, career, or thought leadership brand visible. Hey, besties. So here is the secret to making a thought leadership book more interesting and bestseller worthy. Tell more stories. And before you roll your eyes and tell me that that's just so cliche because storytelling has been hijacked by the business world, it still works. Even on dry subject matters like finance, accounting, or wealth management, they all sparkle and shine when you tell a great story. Case in point, the best example of this is Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, regardless of what you think of him, his alleged schemes, business dealings, reputation, politics, it doesn't matter. You cannot deny that since he first published his book in 1997, that book has sold incredibly well. Not to mention, he's taken it and built it into an entire brand and educational company and all of the things. I mean, the story he told was gripping and it helped a lot of people learn about and become more interested in personal finance, business ownership, and investing. Now, of course, over the years, it's come out that not every single detail in the book was very factual and that he may have embellished some things between his rich dad and his poor dad. But those things don't really matter from a storytelling standpoint and from the fact that we all know his name, we all know this story, and that book taught us some valuable principles. I mean, you read the whole thing from beginning to end, and that is the power of storytelling. So tell me, what questions do you have about storytelling and becoming a better storyteller while writing a thought leadership book? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're there, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content about writing thought leadership books. So now that we see how storytelling can really make a book more interesting, more readable, and primed to be a bestseller in the classical sense of the term, let's explore why including more stories in your thought leadership book makes it more engaging. Number one, stories are a shorthand for creating meaning. People don't just want to see charts, numbers, and statistics. They want to know what those things mean to them so that they can take action on that, whether for themselves personally or for their business. So let's look at our Rich Dad, Poor Dad example again. The main point of Rich Dad, Poor Dad was to teach people about his proprietary concept of the cash flow quadrant. So in case you've never read the book or you're not familiar with the concept, according to Google's AI summary, the cash flow quadrant divides people into 4 categories based on how they earn money: employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor. E, S, B, and I. The core lesson is to move from the left side of the quadrant, the employee and self employed side, to the right side of the quadrant, business owner and investor, to achieve financial freedom, as this shifts you from trading time for money to having your money work for you. Now, would you really have picked up a book called Cash Flow Quadrant? I don't think so. Only maybe if you were like an economics major who's used to paying $200 for a textbook, maybe that might have been interesting to you. But for the rest of us, yeah, no, we're not doing that. It was the compelling story that sucked us all in. And so we see that as he had very humble beginnings, and didn't start off with all these mega millions and billions, us following his trajectory makes us as a reader feel like, if he could do it, maybe I can do it too. And that leads me to the second point, which is that stories help us to see ourselves in a situation without imposing judgment. So often throughout the story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki talks about his biological dad who had an education, had high ranking positions, like he was a superintendent of schools in Hawaii and he became a politician. So he was a well respected public servant. But throughout his life, his dad never really made that much money. He made respectable salaries, but nowhere what you would consider financial freedom. In contrast, Kiyosaki sets up his rich dad in comparison, who basically was like a mentor to him. It was his friend's father who owned a bunch of hotels in Hawaii. Now, rich dad didn't have a formal education, but he had a lot of business acumen and he was wealthy. Now, seeing those examples, most of us can relate to Robert Kiyosaki's natural father, who went to school, got the good education, pursued good high ranking jobs, and got the respect of his community and made a decent middle class salary. We can all relate to that. Most of us have been given that advice all of our lives. And Robert Kiyosaki's point is, where has that advice led us to? Not to wealth and not to financial freedom, however you choose to define it for yourself. So being able to kind of see ourselves or see people in our lives who have followed that advice, we get to challenge ourselves and say, is this the life that I want? And if it's not, can I do something similar to what Robert Kiyosaki did for his own life? So it's like putting ourselves in the story and trying it out for size. What would I look like if I were a multimillionaire and I owned all these different properties and hotels or all these different types of businesses? Is that something that I want? While a story shows us a character and other people, it's usually about exploring ourselves and learning more about ourselves. And this is what you want to inspire when you are writing a thought leadership book. You want to inspire your audience to think about putting themselves through the situations and scenarios that you're laying out in your book. You're very likely offering them some type of transformation to go from where they are to where they want to be in life or in business. And you want to get them imagining, well, if the characters in this book went through this type of transformation, what might it look like if I went through that transformation too? So in particular, when you tell more stories about the type of transformation that you help people through, whether it's a story that you made that transformation yourself, or you've helped a client or two or a whole bunch of clients to undergo that transformation, the more you can tell that type of story, the more your readers will see you as the guide who can help them make that transformation, which is what you want. That's how people wind up getting clients and opportunities from writing thought leadership books. And number three, why telling more stories in your thought leadership books makes it more engaging is because stories help to create an emotional response in people. And we usually remember how we feel more than we remember any facts or figures. Maya Angelou famously said, I've learned that people will forget what you've said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Tell a great story, and the people experiencing that story will get all of the feels and associate those feelings to you, especially if they're good ones, especially if it's hopeful, where they feel like, wow, I think I can really do this, whatever this transformation is in your story. The more personal stories that you share, and especially if you are a content creator, a podcast host, a streamer, things like that, the more you share stories about yourself or about your life, the more people will feel like they know you. And the more people know you, the more they like you, the more they trust you, and the more they buy from you. without having to do any hardcore selling. And most people don't like the idea of selling. We want it to feel natural and organic. Telling more stories will exponentially increase the probability of a sale. So if you're this far into the video, I'm guessing you want to learn how to tell better stories. Now, I share a lot about storytelling through the different types of content that I produce on different channels. So if you want to make sure you're never missing your opportunity to learn how to become a better storyteller, then I invite you to sign up for my email list. Every Monday morning around 5 a.m. Eastern, I send out a quick message encouraging you on your writing journey and links to content that can help. Join my email list by going to writingwithdeniserenee.com, scroll down to the bottom of the homepage, and drop in your email. But you don't have to wait till Monday morning to learn how to be a better storyteller. Because next up, I'm going to teach you a very key concept about storytelling right now. There are 5 elements included in every good story, and I call them the 5 C's of every good story. Once I show it to you, you will see it everywhere. From your favorite books, TV shows, content, you name it, these 5 elements are key. Get these 5 elements right, and you'll have people eating out of the palm of your hand, bestie. Yes. Now, I have to say, I've never heard anybody else teach it in this particular framework, and I didn't get it from ChatGPT. Okay. I came up with it from my own experience of years of studying and practicing writing and telling stories, not to mention experiencing a lot of great stories in my time. So here are the 5 elements of every good story. You need characters, you need care, you need context, you need a challenge, and you need a conclusion. So characters. We need to know who in the world are the characters. And this is both straightforward and a little bit tricky when it comes to thought leadership business books. So the straightforwardness of it is that the characters are going to be the people in the story. Ideally, you want to make sure there's one main character. So in the case of thought leadership books, it's usually going to be someone real. It might be yourself as the main character. It might be a client that you've helped as the main character. It might be a mentor that you're talking about because maybe you're talking about a particular incident that happened where you learned something. And character can also be an inanimate object or a thing or a place. But for the most part, in business stories, it's going to be a character. And the thing that can kind of be a little bit more nuanced is that for it to be very effective, for helping you to get new clients and opportunities for your business, for your brand, you want to make sure that the character is someone your audience can relate to. Your ideal client should be able to relate to the character. And you don't want to necessarily set yourself up as the hero. All right. Even if you are the main character in your story, you either A, want to make sure that, like I said, your audience can see themselves in your journey because you're sharing, hey, I went from A to B. This is how I did it, and you can do it too. Or you're showing how you were able to help some other main character who is a typology of your ideal customer, how you as the guide helped get that character in the story from A to B, because you want your ideal customer to be assuming that, hey, my new favorite guru over here is going to help me go from A to B, just like they helped that character in their story go from A to B. Okay? You picking up what I'm throwing down? All right. So the next and crucial part of a story is care. Why do we care about this character? Why do we care about this situation? If you don't get this right, you don't have a story. Okay. You don't want to just throw any random details together, because without helping your audience understand why they should be caring, you're not going to get the emotional response that you need in order for your story to have the results that you want. And care can be tied to the next 2 elements, context and challenge. So I'm going to talk about challenge first, and then I'm going to double back to context. So a challenge is, well, what's the problem, right? What are the stakes? Why is the problem so important to the character? That is where care comes in. Because if you have a great match between the challenge and why we should care, why the character cares, and why your audience should care, then you've hooked your audience. Context is important, and in some stories, it's more important, and in other stories, it's a little bit less important. Context means that nothing happens within a vacuum. Contexts are those expositional elements that we find out in a story that may have some importance. You could talk about the challenges a woman has starting a business in 2018, and that will have one particular context. Now, change the year to 1918, and you can see how the context makes a huge difference and where this woman is in the world. A woman in certain countries starting a business in 2019 in the United States might face one set of challenges. Place that woman in a region of the world with a different cultural structure, with a different political climate, and that woman could be facing way more seemingly insurmountable odds. So you don't have to tell us everything in context, but there may be some contextual clues that we may need to know that help us to care more about your story and about the characters and about the problem and about seeing and experiencing a resolution in your story. And that leads us to conclusion. Your conclusion is going to be your resolution. How does this problem resolve? Not every problem has a happy ending, but every problem has some kind of resolve. Either it's going to work out to our expectation, it's going to work out better than expected, and things may take a dark turn we never saw coming. But there's always some resolution. So no matter what, you open up a curiosity loop when you introduce characters and context and a challenge, and we're caring. We need to close it up by figuring out, well, how does this conclude? So now that I ran through that, you see what I mean? Once you understand the elements of a good story, you can't unsee it. Every good story, every good book you've ever read, every good movie or TV show you've ever watched, every great speaker that you've seen give a TED talk, every podcast host that you like, they're telling stories, and those stories have these 5 elements. So I don't want to just tell you what are the 5 C's of a good story. I want to show you how to use these elements to tell stories in your thought leadership book. But if in addition to writing a book, you're also a content creator, trust me, start using these elements in your stories, and you come back to this video and let me know in the comments how it's going for you and how those stories are helping you to connect better with your audience. Okay, but let's specifically give you some tips and strategies for telling more stories in your thought leadership book. Tip number 1 is that your stories should be real. It should really be about you or really be about people that you've helped. Now, it is okay to anonymize some names and places to protect identities, and especially if you don't have someone's permission to tell their story, you might want to change some details so that they're not easily recognizable. Sometimes it might be okay to fictionalize some details if it helps to clarify the story or move things along. It shouldn't be that you're rewriting the whole entire thing that what happens. That's a work of fiction. So what I mean is, for example, I tell a story in my book, Write Your Book, 10 Mindset Hacks to Move You from Fear to Finish. I tell a story about a person named Carmen, who I met at a particular networking event, who told me all about wanting to write a book. In reality, the particular event that I referenced, I met several people. My goal was to illustrate one particular point, and it didn't make sense that I had 4 or 5 different characters. I decided to kind of combine elements of all of the people that I spoke to that night into one character. So the character Carmen wasn't really one single person. It was really a composite of 4 or 5 different people that I spoke to that night. But the situation was very real because the concerns that the character brings up are concerns that I get all the time in my consultations. So while a few elements were fictionalized, the reality of the story and the fact that I speak to a Carmen type person frequently, that's very real. Number 2, you want to make sure that in giving us those 5 C's, the character, the care, the context, the conflict, and the conclusion, you want to make sure that your story does 3 things: make a connection, transfer an emotion, and influence a decision. That's the type of connection that's needed to help your audience feel more endeared to you and to your brand and to your business. Now, I talk about this more in a podcast episode I did called How I Tapped Into My Inner Storyteller, and you can too. I'll link it for you down in the description box. And then number 3, the stories that you tell in your thought leadership book should be directly related to how you help your reader make a change in their personal or professional life. In other words, it should be connected to what it is that you do. So it should be connected to the products and the services that you provide, even if your product is entertainment. So maybe you're a creator and you're looking to grow your audience by writing your book. You still want to create that emotional connection so that people want to follow you more. They want to support your Patreon or paid community, whatever it happens to be. You always want to make a connection from the pages of your book into a way for you to directly communicate with your new reader. Offer them a free download in exchange for their email address. Offer them free access to your community so that they can get more content from you on a weekly or monthly basis, whatever your production cadence is. Always be looking for an opportunity to give your reader the next best logical step into becoming a lifelong fan or becoming a lifelong patron of your business. So I hope you found this video helpful to your thought leadership book writing journey. And if you want to go a little bit deeper, check out this video next.